welcome to everyone. We are looking at the Business Administrator Endpoint Assessment version 3, which is obviously starting for those registered from the 10th of September 2020 onwards. And I'll be going through in detail what that means to you and what that means to the apprentice, and how, as an EPAO, we can support you and the apprentice. So a bit of a welcome. I'm Zoe Benfield. I am the lead IQA for Customer Service and Business Administrator. I am recording this session today as it will be shared as a webinar to our website. And any questions, please put via the chat box or question box, which I believe most of you have now found. So the aims of the webinar today is to look at the changes from version 1 to version 3, what resources and support are available, and sharing good practice and steps to success. Who will version 3 affect? So this will affect any apprentices registered on or after the 10th of September 2020. So any apprentices that you have registered with you on programme on or after the 10th of September 2020, they will be registered on version 3. So the main difference that is going to be occurring will be the grading, and it will be, it is slightly different, it has changed. So we are looking at the knowledge test first. Now the knowledge test is the one component that hasn't changed. The knowledge test, there's no difference in the grade boundaries. The portfolio interview, whereas before we did it on a 60% achievement, it is now done on pass criteria and distinction criteria. So all pass criteria must be met to achieve a pass, and all pass and distinction criteria must be met to achieve a distinction. And this is also reflected in the project presentation. All pass criteria must be met to achieve a pass, and all pass and distinction criteria must be met to achieve a distinction. So to get a distinction now, rather than working on an aggregated grade, which we did before, the apprentice must achieve all criteria in both components. So I'm going to break down the components a little bit more detail for you. So the multiple choice test, there is no changing to grading for the multiple choice test. So to get a distinction, the apprentice must achieve between 40 and 50 marks out of the 50 available to achieve a distinction for this component. To achieve a pass, they must achieve between 30 and 39 out of 50 to get a pass for this component. They will not achieve a pass for this component if they get 0 to 29. That would be classed as a fail for this component, at which point they would need to resit. So the multiple choice test can still be taken via online testing with yourselves invigilating, employer invigilation, or proctoring. And we have more information about employer invigilation and proctoring and remote invigilation on our website. The links you can see below. And also on our knowledge base. So for those of you who are using ACE 360 at the moment, we have a knowledge base, which I'm sure you are aware of, on ACE 360, which has all of our most up-to-date information available for you to use, including our specifications, our additional resources, and any generic information regarding booking tests, appealing, etc. So in regards to multiple choice test, this does not have any changes from version 1 to version 3. However, as said, the portfolio interview and project presentation, there will be changes. So the endpoint assessment itself will remain the same. The two components will be completed separately. So the apprentice will prepare a portfolio and prepare a project and the presentation to be uploaded to ACE 360 for them to complete separately on the day of endpoint assessment. The grade criteria will remain the same, so the requirements will remain the same. So we'll still have the same standard areas and the same grade criteria for both components. The project presentation has been simplified slightly, and that will be reflected in the new EPA resource pack that will be available on ACE within the next few weeks. The way that we are assessing will change slightly. So the IEAs will assess the project and the portfolio as we always have. So we will look at each one individually and ask the apprentice to go through the portfolio interview and the project presentation. However, now we can holistically look across the two components. Whereas before, it was very much individual. If they achieve the grade criteria in one, we couldn't then match that across the other. We can now do that. So we can take a holistic approach to our assessment over the both components. So now to get a distinction, the multiple choice test, you must achieve 40 to 50 out of 50. All grade criteria must be met in the portfolio and all grade criteria must be met in the project. However, we will look at these two components holistically, and if the grade criteria has been met in the portfolio and not in the project, we will grade this across. To get a pass now, they must achieve a minimum of 30 out of 39 on the multiple choice test, and all pass criteria must be met across the portfolio and project. And a fail would be, for the multiple choice test, would be 0 to 29, and the portfolio, not all pass criteria met, and for the project, not all pass criteria met. So the aggregated score will no longer be used. So the aggregated score, whereas before we added up the grades to see what the final score was out of 250, this will no longer be used. It will all be done on meeting all pass criteria or all distinction criteria. So this is a non-exhaustive list of what could happen. So if they fail the multiple choice test, portfolio and project, the overall grade would obviously be a fail. If they passed all three, it would be a pass. So if they met all pass criteria, it would be a pass. And a distinction would mean meeting all distinction criteria for the portfolio and project, as well as all the pass criteria. If they got a pass on one component and distinctions on the other two, it would still be a pass. If they got a fail in one component, it would be a fail overall. And this is just an example of what the grades might look like and how that links to the overall grade. The top 3 lines are the simplified version of this. So now we're going to look at how we can help the apprentices achieve what we can do as an EPO, what we provide as an EPO, and how you can help the apprentices while they're on programme and prepare for their endpoint assessment. So what resources do we have? We have got the level 3 specification. Again, this is available on our website and on the knowledge base on ACE 360. There is an endpoint assessment resource pack. This is currently the additional resources on ACE 360. When version 3 has been put up onto ACE 360, the new endpoint assessment resource pack specifically for version 3 will be available for you. We have a mapping grid for the portfolio interview. Again, this can be found on ACE 360 knowledge base. And we also have many webinars on our Steps to Success page on our website. And again, there is a link to this. And you can also search within our website for the Steps to Success webinars. And this is for all subjects, not just business administrator. And as I've already said, we also have the knowledge base on ACE 360. And this would be updated to the version once it has been released onto ACE 360 and has the most up-to-date information that you, your apprentices and your employers will need to help the apprentices succeed. So first we're going to look into how we can succeed on the portfolio. At present, you do not need to get all pass criteria to be able to pass. This will be the major change. The major change is all pass criteria must be met. So whereas before, if they didn't achieve the criteria around logistics, that didn't matter as long as they had enough evidence elsewhere to get the 60 out of 100. Now each criteria must be mapped. Now the best way to do this is utilise the mapping grid and link the mapping grid to the evidence requirements, which can be found in, at present, the additional resources, and in the future, the Endpoint Assessment Resource Pack, or EPAP. These two documents with the evidence requirements and the mapping grid give you all the information that the apprentice will need to be able to build a portfolio with the best chance of success. Another key point is to make sure the apprentice has practiced using the mapping grid and their evidence. So the apprentice must know their evidence inside out. They must know how that evidence is linked to the grade criteria, and they must fully understand why that evidence is mapped where it is. So a good step to success here would be to have a mock and go through some of the grade criteria and ask them to show you evidence that links to that and how it links to that. And remember, evidence should be work product. That could be screenshots of work they have created or completed, observations from assessors, or witness testimonies from an expert witness, such as a line manager. That is a non-exhaustive list, and I will show you an example of the mapping grid in a minute with a few more ideas for you. Ensure each grade criteria is mapped against evidence. So the grade criteria that require work product, and again this is clearly stated on the mapping grid, what grade criteria and standard areas require that evidence. Make sure there is something for each one of them. A good piece of evidence obviously can be used across multiple grade criteria. So you do not need lots of evidence. I would recommend 15 pieces of evidence is adequate if they can be used holistically across grade criteria. This also makes it easier for the apprentices to be able to find their evidence, as they don't have too many pieces to try and find. The behaviours, which are standard areas 13 to 17, we look at those holistically across the assessment. However, it is good practice to have evidence that links to that within the portfolio. So, for example, standard area 16, which is adapting to change, could quite easily be linked to how they are changed to different systems, how they have changed, how they've made recommendations for resource improvements and planning improvements. So it is good to have those linked across. And grade criteria that doesn't need work product should also be revised. So for example, standard area 7, which is about their organisation, they should be able to revise this area and know the sort of questions they may be asked. So what the aims are of their industry, how their industry links to the local business environment. And all this is clearly stated on the mapping grid that they don't need evidence. However, the evidence requirements are there for them to see in the EPAP or additional resources. So this should also be revised with them so they have an understanding of how to meet that grade criteria. So this is an example of the mapping grid. So the mapping grid has the grade criteria that is required to be met. And then it has examples of what could be used to meet those criteria. So for example, 1P1 demonstrates they can use IT packages specifically to write letters or emails and to record and analyse information. So portfolio evidence could include word processing software, copies of letters, reports, or email software, so screenshots of emails. And also 1P2 about performing their role using IT packages. This could also include CRM systems, databases, spreadsheet software. And again, we've also written in there that they can use expert witness testimony for this as well, and workplace observations. So we have given examples in there of what could be used. They may have something else, as long as it is valid, authentic, and sufficient. There is then a box next to it for them to be able to write in which piece of evidence they are using to meet this criteria. So one of the key points I will say is their evidence should be clearly labelled. So if they have 15 pieces of evidence, the easiest way to do that would be number it 1 through 15. So for example, 1, IT, and then they had information about IT in that. This way they can find it. If they have names that aren't relevant to the grade criteria, if they have numbers because it's been pulled down off Smart Assessor, this can become confusing for them. So a clearly labelled portfolio is key. If they have it in one document, so for example, they have one Word document or one PDF, make sure they have the page numbers to where to find that evidence so they can get to it quickly. As before, the portfolio interview is only 45 minutes long. So being able to find that evidence quickly to make sure that time, the assessment is completed within that time is essential. When using this mapping grid, it should be used alongside the evidence requirements that are found in the additional resources and endpoint assessment resource pack, or EPAP. So steps to success for the project. So the project at the moment, again, is marked out of 100, and at present, you only need 60 out of 100 to be able to achieve a pass. Again, that has now changed. For anyone registered on version 3, they will need to get 100% of pass criteria to get a pass, and 100% of pass and distinction criteria to enable them to achieve a distinction. So we need to make sure that all the evidence in the project is linked to the relevant grade criteria to enable them to achieve those high pass criteria and distinction where possible. For a distinction, a significant project must be undertaken. The apprentice must lead the project. This must be the apprentice's project. They must take ownership for this project. They must lead the team, work with stakeholders, and run the project. And again, utilise the resources available, the specification and EPAP, currently called the additional resources. And again, ensure the evidence requirements are met. And I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail to give you a little bit more understanding of a significant project. Now, the idea behind the EPAP, the EPA resource pack, is that it can be shared with the apprentice and the employer. There is already EPAPs being used for some standards, including customer service, and when the version 3 comes out shortly, then the resource pack can be shared with the apprentice. The resource pack is written in a way that is apprentice and employer friendly, has checklists for the apprentice to be able to tick off when they believe they've achieved something, and has grade criteria of evidence requirements clearly stated what they must achieve to meet those grade criteria. So the EPAPs have been written in a way that the apprentice and employer can understand, so they can support the employer can also support the apprentice. So which brings me on to what is a significant project. Now at the moment, the main downfall for people getting 100% on the project would be the fact they do smaller projects. So to get the distinction grade criteria, which is linked to project management, they must plan and manage a significant project. They must demonstrate strong leadership skills when managing a project. They must be able to understand and apply a strong grasp of project management tools and principles. So I'm just going to go back slightly here and go through the evidence requirements underneath this. So plans and manages a significant project. The evidence requirements within the additional resources and EPARP state how they effectively manage the project, including the consideration and management of risks, contingency planning, and how they evaluated the project, including the effectiveness of the planning, managing, and implementation of the project, including strengths and weaknesses. They have to demonstrate how they led and managed the project, including effective monitoring of resources and making changes as necessary over the duration of the project to maximize resource utilization. They must demonstrate leadership skills, including providing direction to others, taking ownership and accountability for project decisions and outcomes. They must have effective use of project management tools throughout the project and management principles throughout the project. So this would be a variety of management tools and principles rather than your standard SMART targets and maybe one other project management tool. So a significant project should be something that has a significant impact on the organisation. So when I say significant impact, this should be something that is measurable. It should be a measurable cost saving, a measurable improvement to customer service, and it's also going to be relevant to the business. Obviously, some businesses are smaller, therefore the projects may be smaller in size, but if they can show a significant difference to that business and can be proven through the grade criteria, then this will be considered. A larger company with maybe a more measurable, tangible output, then we would expect a larger, significant project. We will make it relevant to the business, however, it must cover the grade criteria. And a significant project should be measurable. The significant project must include all the evidence requirements as stated, which can be found in the EPARP, currently the additional resources, and must be fully led and managed by the apprentice. So the apprentice is the one managing this, creating this, doing this. They must be able to lead a team to implement the change in process. So the apprentice doing this has full ownership of this project. Therefore, a significant project, they should be using I rather than we. So this will be the main change. This would be the main hurdle to overcome, is going from a smaller project to a significant project for those apprentices who want to aim for distinction. A good project, a good significant project, should have the PowerPoint presentation, and alongside, if they wanted to, they can have a project report to support that. One thing I will say is a key thing with the difference between a small project and a significant project is how it has impacted the organisation in a measurable way through surveys, feedback, cost saving analysis, and that is one of the key differences. Also, a small project may only have one or two stakeholders. A significant project should involve either more stakeholders or a team to be led to create the project. As linked to the evidence requirements, and also resource utilisation, making sure they are using resources available to them what resources they have used, and what is the cost impact of those resources if necessary. So this part is helping you prepare for the next step to overcome the hurdles of going from a small to a significant project. So in summary today, I've gone through a lot of the resources available for you to be able to use. So obviously we have the webinars, we have the A360 knowledge base, we have our website, and support is available where required. Version 3 should be out on A360 knowledge base shortly. We are in the final stages of writing up the new specification in EPA, ready for you to be able to use. However, the grade criteria haven't changed. Therefore, the current resources are transferable. All pass criteria and distinction criteria within them will be the same. Obviously, the main difference is the version 1 to version 3 grading. So we've gone from an aggregated score to all pass criteria and all distinction criteria needing to be met to achieve. The only other main change between version 1 and version 3 is resits will be able to be graded at a distinction. So as before, they could do 1 resit and still get distinction. They can now do 2 resits and still achieve a distinction. However, if they achieve a pass on the first attempt, they cannot retake to achieve a higher score. Once they have completed a pass, that is a final grading. I've gone through some of the steps to success with you. So I've looked at the portfolio interview and what you can do to help support the apprentice and employer to ensure that all grade criteria have been met. And that is mainly using the EPA additional resources that are available, the mapping grid for the portfolio interview, and ensuring those grade criteria can be met. One of the other key points I've said is that the apprentice should be fully aware of all the information that they have. So exactly what is in their portfolio, how it is mapped to the grade criteria, and also they should be able to practice this and revise this. So in terms of the presentation, they could practice this to an audience, to their on-program assessor, so they are very familiar with their presentation. So when they are presenting, it becomes a very fluid professional presentation, making sure they use all those grade criteria. So making sure that they're using IT, making sure they're using transitions and animations within their PowerPoints, making sure they're presenting professionally to ensure they can meet all grade criteria. With their portfolio interview, again, practice asking where they can find evidence for particular grade criteria while using their mapping grid. So when they come to the day of assessment, the IEA can say to them, we are now looking at standard area 4, and they all know exactly where to find the evidence for 4P1, 4P2, 4P3, etc. So again, we've looked at best practice. The apprentices that practice and revise and know their evidence inside out are the ones that succeed. The ones that know exactly how to link their grade criteria to their evidence are the apprentices who fully understand and have achieved the highest grades. We have had apprentices achieve 100 out of 100 frequently on the portfolio interview and infrequently on the presentation, which is why I've gone over the distinction criteria for the project presentation around project management and a significant project. And again, the changes between version 1 and version 3 apply from the 10th of September 2020. So any apprentices that were registered on programme from the 10th of September 2020 will be on version 3. So we're expecting our first apprentices through with this new grading system at the earliest of the 10th of September 2021. So this is now where I pass it over to yourselves. Now please write in the question box or the chat box. I will have both open to be able to answer any questions that you may have with the differences I've described today. Okay, so I'm going for the first question there about our learners use Eportfolio. How best is it to identify page numbers as not physical pages? Will the IEA require access to this Eportfolio? There are two ways of doing that, Lisa. The first way would be that the IEA has access to Eportfolio, which we can do. And the apprentice would just need to know which evidence applies. So they should have a separate endpoint assessment folder within their Eportfolio, and that is the only folder they can use. So it will have their key pieces of evidence in there, and they would have to know what that evidence is titled. The other way of doing it is downloading that evidence off of Eportfolio and getting the apprentices to organise it in a folder that they understand. Also, by giving them ownership of preparing their own folders, it helps them understand exactly where their evidence is and how it is linked to the mapping grid. And obviously by them doing their mapping grid as well, even if they're having support, that will help them identify exactly what evidence is required for what. Yes, Emma, those who were registered before the 10th of September 2020 should have been registered under version 1, therefore will be on version 1. So Anjuman, you just put about, we've just started to use Smart Assessor. So with Smart Assessor, again, it will be either an option to allow the IEA access to that, but they will have to have a specific endpoint assessment folder because only that evidence can be used. The whole of the unprogrammed learning would be too much evidence and too confusing for the apprentice to use. Again, if you want to download it and allow the apprentice to build a portfolio and zip that file and upload it to ACE360 when it's their time to do their assessment, that is fine. I'll have to get back to you on the reference code on that one, Sheila. I know that I've been typing in a lot, but I don't know if it's a different reference code to the first one. So I will have to get back to you on that. Apologies. So the portfolio should be completed after month 3, so they can start building a portfolio after month 3 of their apprenticeship. By that time, grade criteria and endpoint assessment can be introduced to them, and they can build up a portfolio of evidence that way. So for example, if you are seeing them once a month, you may want to get them to look at one particular grade criteria, standard area, so standard area 6, for example, and see what evidence they can build for that. The project presentation should be started in month 9, ready for endpoint assessments after those 12, 15 or 18 month periods. So Katie, what if the 15 pieces of work does not cover all the criteria? The 15 pieces of work, so for example, if you had one piece of work with a lot of email chains in it, so if there's screenshots of 4 different email chains, that could be still classed as one piece of evidence. Those 4 pieces of evidence, those 4 different email chains don't need to be on a different document. They can be on one. And then again, those 4 different email chains may show different behaviours, actions and knowledge, but still cover IT and communication. So you're building a portfolio that may be able to be cross-referenced. If the apprentice wants to separate it all out and they're happy doing that, that is fine, but too many pieces of evidence does get confusing and time consuming to be able to share that to screen. Lisa, so all apprenticeships are reviewed, endpoint assessments are reviewed, and different versions are put in place when it is decided to change the outputs. So on this occasion, version 1 was reviewed, and it was decided that instead of doing the aggregated grade, they would do the pass and distinction criteria instead. So the first version was the one that everyone was put on beforehand. Version 3 is the reviewed version and the new version that is coming out. So each endpoint assessment at some point will get reviewed and be on their version 1, 2 or 3. We've skipped a version at the moment because there was an interim version that never got released. Okay, Kashmiro, so does a portfolio require commentary around the evidence? If the apprentice wants to write short notes, that is absolutely fine. Just to prompt them, that is not a problem. Scripts for the grade criteria are not allowed. Notes are. The 15 pieces of work have to cover all the knowledge, skills and behaviour. Each individual piece of work doesn't have to cover all the knowledge, skills and behaviour. So we have some people, I'm thinking best practice here, who will have a document around IT to cover standard area 1, and they have that in one document. Then you look at standard area 5, they might have a document around quality. Then they have standard area 10 around relevant regulation, and each one of those might be an individual bit of evidence for different standard areas. However, sometimes they can cross over. So on the mapping grid, it might say, look at document 1, which has emails, screenshots of CRM systems. However, there might also be some IT knowledge in quality. So the mapping grid would state where that information can be found. So Debbie, it is up to the training provider and the on-programme assessors to be able to share the EPUB with the students. So it will be on ACE360 when it is released, and that can be downloaded by anyone registered to ACE360, and that can be shared with the apprentice either in digital form or be printed out for them. So Anjuman, the EPA project and interview, so they're separate components, but they can be completed on the same day. So for example, if I booked an assessment between 10 and 12, I may do at 10 o'clock the portfolio interview, and then at 11 o'clock do the project with them. So they are completed as separate components, but they can be completed on the same day. At present, I don't have a hard and firm answer between at the date this will be available. All meetings have occurred that would be required to release the information. So I believe it is now just in the proofreading stage. As soon as the information is available on ACE360, your business development managers will be able to share this. Now, one key thing I will say is if your company is registered on ACE360, please ensure the contact details registered to ACE360 as our main contact are still valid. Make sure that person still works at your institute. So Kashmira, so the grade criteria hasn't changed. The old version still can be used for version 1 and also for preparing the students for version 3. So the grade criteria hasn't changed. The depth that you go into and making sure that they cover all criteria is the main difference. Okay. Okay, I believe I've answered all questions there for you. If you have any more, please feel free to pop them in. So in terms of sharing this PowerPoint, it will be available within a few days on our website. So it will be under the Steps to Success area of the endpoint assessment part of our website. In terms of version 1 and version 3, as an endpoint assessment organisation, we have no say on when version 3 comes out, when the date of that started. That is something that we just have to comply with. The information from ESFA, Ofqual, Open Awards is readily available through their websites and the differences. So all changes are available. One thing I will say is if you have LinkedIn, follow these sites and they'll be able to tell you, they advertise these changes as and when they happen. So the recording of this won't be sent out, however, it will be available on our website within a few days. With any changes to any of the standards, the information is available on gov.uk and the changes do get registered onto there as part of Institute for Apprenticeships and also ESFA. So those are available as soon as changes are decided upon, they are advertised, which is when we get the information that we then need to change our approach. Okay. Is there any further questions before I end the webinar today? If there are any further questions at any point, please send them through to either epadelivery@pearson.com or myself if you have my email. And if you do want to re-listen to this webinar, it will be uploaded to the website in due course. Okay. Thank you very much for your time today. It is very much appreciated, and good luck with all your apprentices going forward.